Hello everyone, welcome to Global Compliance Panel's live webinar on Medical Device Complaint Handling, MDR, Reports of Removals and Corrections. My name is Kiara, I'm going to be your host today. On behalf of the Global Compliance Panel team, I would like to thank all of you for being part of this event. Today's webinar will be presented by Anna Longwell. Anna Longwell is currently Principal Attorney of Palo Alto Law Firm, Longwell & Associates, which specializes in food and drug law. The firm has expertise in U.S. FDA expectations, regulation, and law affecting the development and ultimate marketing of new medical products, drugs, devices, and biologics. She has been a visiting lecturer in food and drug law at the University of Santa Clara School of Law, a visiting lecturer in food law at the Institute of Agribusiness, University of Santa Clara School of Business, a visiting lecturer in regulatory topics at the Haas School of Business, UC Berkeley and UC Santa Cruz Extension, and an instructor for the Food and Drug Law Institute internship program at Catholic University, Washington, D.C. Currently, she is co-teaching a class in U.S. Medical Device Regulation, Winter Quarters at UCSC. Ms. Longwell has co-authored a book chapter titled Due Diligence Points to Consider in the Expert's Guide to Healthcare Product Due Diligence, published by FDLI. Ms. Longwell holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry from San Francisco College for Women, a master's degree in physical science from Stanford University, and a JD and MBA from the University of Santa Clara School of Law and School of Business, respectively. She is a current member of the California Bar and the U.S. Patent Bar. We are honored to have Anna with us to present the webinar today. Before we begin the webinar, I would like to inform you that the webinar is outlined for 60 minutes duration. Firstly, Anna will explain about the areas that will be covered, and then she would share with you her presentation. We would also like to inform you that all the participants, once part of the teleconference, have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A begins towards the end of the webinar. We also request all of you to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of the time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. If for any reason you get logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join again. Now that we are all ready to start, I request Anna to take it from here. Anna?
Yes, thank you, Kara. This subject is a very popular subject, mainly because a lot of mistakes in this area go into both 483s and even warning letters. This is an outline of what I intend to talk about. First of all, complaint files, and then for all devices, medical device reports, recalls, and reports of removal and correction. Electronic products that are also medical devices have an additional set of rules that they must adhere to: repair, replace, and refund. And there is additional reporting for PMA products, mainly annual reporting and things like that. So with that outline, let's go to our first topic, which is complaint files. The Quality System Regulation, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, 21 CFR 82198, says that complaint files are a requirement of the Quality System Regulation. All device manufacturers must keep complaint files. This is a requirement that persists even for Class 1 exempt products. Even when a product is exempted from all of the rest of the QSR, it has to have complaint files. And failure in some part of this regulation is often a component of the FDA warning letters. Here's an example. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, here we go. This is a warning letter that I copied, and on the other side, it enlarges it so you can actually read it. This was a fairly recent warning letter. And you can see that the MedStar units failed in a number of times, and the product was returned. However, your firm failed to review, evaluate, and investigate these complaints. So therefore, they kept complaint files, but their complaint files were incomplete. The complaint files have a regulatory requirement for review of complaints and investigation of complaints, all of which has to be in the complaint file. Okay, what is a complaint? Well, it's any communication, however its form is, that alleges deficiencies related to any product component, any product performance of the device, anything that has to do with the durability of the device. These are all things, and it's any. That means not just customer complaints, but required complaint features talk to us about the absolute requirement that that complaint be investigated. And what is a complaint? It's any. That is, they can come from internal. Your engineers can actually give you a complaint. They have to be reviewed, and they have to be reviewed in a particular way. And that review has to be in the complaint file. Okay. Here we are. And once again, I can't repeat too many times. You have to have those files. You should be designating a formal complaint handling unit. You have to establish and maintain procedures, and those are documented procedures for receiving, reviewing, and evaluating. And as I said before, those complaints can come from anywhere. Many companies get into trouble because they have actually established and maintained procedures, but the procedures do not conform with the regulation. That is, the regulation says any communication. That communication, often companies forget about communications internal. They just look at the external communications. That's a fatal mistake because your engineers, as I said, your design and development people can, in fact, inform you of a complaint before anybody outside. You should be grateful for that. It allows you to deal with the complaint before any of your consumers find out that it exists. So, anyway, let's go on then, once we've reviewed complaints, to go to reports that are specific to devices. Medical device reporting, which just recently had a new regulation finalized with respect to e-reporting, and I will go over that in this presentation. Medical device reporting is 21 CFR 803. Reports of correction and removals is 24 CON 806, and those are both fairly old regulations, but even older than those is the notification of electronic product defect, 21 CFR 1003. This is a regulation that actually comes from a totally different law, and one which the Division of Radiological Health is given to FDA in the 70s. This notification of electronic product defect has very little to do with either of the other two regulations and only applies to products that are electronic products, whether or not they are medical devices or not. But all of those are regulated by FDA. Okay, let's first start with medical device reports because they really are the most important reports and the ones that cause people the most trouble in terms of compliance. They are, as I said, at 21 CFR 803. And they're designed, that reg is designed to let FDA know of device malfunctions that did or could cause death or serious injury. And as I said, how do you find out about them? Usually customer complaints or internally generated information. And user facilities as well as manufacturer distributors are required to report these. User facilities only report when a death or serious injury occurs. That is, your customers actually, probably many of your customers don't even know of this regulation, but they'll report to you when a death or serious injury occurs associated with the use of a device, but they usually won't report. It's up to you to have in your procedures for manufacturers, it's up to you or distributors to let the user facility know that they also have an obligation under law to report to FDA. So that should be in your procedures. Find out if the user facility actually has reported to FDA, and if they haven't, let them know they're supposed to do that. Which customers must make reports in user facilities? Well, hospitals, ambulatory surgical facilities, most places that actually end up using your device. But some don't have to report. FDA would like them to report, but they aren't required under law to report. Doctor's offices, school nurse, employee health units, these don't have to report. And I guess the one that FDA would really like to report mostly is doctor's offices, though the other two as well. Users are supposed to report both to FDA and to the manufacturers. That's why when you have your procedures, you really should have procedures for interacting with users that have made reports of a death or a serious injury associated somehow with your use of your device. Who else? Well, importers or initial distributors of product manufactured ex-US. So they have to report adverse events and malfunctions. Other distributors aren't required, but they must keep the records. So they have no requirement at this time for reporting. Okay. All right, so what do they mean, the FDA, by malfunction? Quite possibly a lot of compliance problems are actually caused by the fact that the company doesn't really understand what FDA is talking about. A device malfunction is any event that is something that gives the user an idea that the device is not working properly. And, you know, they may be wrong, but if they think that the device isn't working properly and there's a problem, or could be a problem if that malfunction would recur, then they're really supposed to report it. Once again, most device users have no clue as to what this regulation means. So you're probably getting better information internally than you are externally. This regulation says nothing about whether that recurrence of the malfunction would be likely. Just if it were to recur, a death or serious injury would be likely. You know, so therefore, even if the possibility of a malfunction were very remote, but if it did occur, a death or serious injury would be likely, then the MDR is required. And that's both from the user and from the manufacturer. One of the problems, of course, is that many times users haven't got a clue as to who, in fact, the manufacturer is. And that's why the FDA also wants them to report directly to the FDA. However, there the problem is that users are often simply unaware of this requirement. So let's go to the manufacturers, which I assume are the people I'm talking to. If the source is a complaint, be sure that the complaint file has a record. Remember, did it fail to meet specs? Was it being used for treatment or diagnosis? Was it being used for the indication in the labeling? And what was the adverse event? And what was the relationship of the device to the event? Was there any? If there isn't any relationship, simply explain this conclusion. You don't really have to do an MDR at that point, but you do have to have your reasoning in your complaint file. Don't simply say no relation. Say no relation because, say, the device is designed to do X. This device can't possibly do the event that was described in the complaint. And it can't do it because of X, Y, Z. Now, the reports are made to FDA center, not your local FDA person. The MedWatch form is used to report MDRs, and the content is described in the reg. The majority of these are 30-day reports, but some are 5-day manufacturer reports. These are reports that indicate that there is not only a risk to an individual employing this product, but there's a serious risk to public health from the use of this product. FDA may request 5-day reports once they get that first report. What they'll do is they'll tell you if anything else like this happens, we want to know about it within 5 days. But sometimes the manufacturer simply decides that this constitutes a serious risk. Maybe that possibility of the adverse event is pretty frequent given what they know now about the device that they didn't know when they started to market it. So this time limit is for importers or manufacturers. And by becoming aware, FDA means anybody becoming aware. This requirement for 5-day is one of the things that becomes more crucial when you're talking about the now required EMDRs, or the EMDRs that will become required next year. The reg is final, but in fact there is a term that allows manufacturers to get used to doing them, and we'll be talking about that in a little while. And if that MDR report is required for an incident with a product that would qualify as an electronic product, only an MDR need be filed. So even though you have a product that is in fact an electronic product, an X-ray machine, or some other, say, IVD that employs some kind of energy to, like a laser or something like that, that would qualify as an electronic product, you only need to file the MDR. So anyway, user reports, if there is a death, you have 10 days. As I said, if you consider it a serious injury that is going to have public health, then you have to file in 5 days. but in general, 10 days. Serious injury, manufacturer unknown, 10 days. And annual reports. If the MDR is during the year, anything else that isn't a death or a serious injury with a manufacturer unknown or to the manufacturer, then all they need to do is an annual report. And then again, becomes known means to medical personnel that are affiliated or employed, and any information that reasonably suggests you have an MDR in hand. And those medical personnel, that is, if you're a small company and you simply have an MD that's on consultancy, it could be that medical personnel that actually gets the report. And from that time, you have 10 days to report to FDA. Again, that's really short because sometimes information gets bogged down in the company someplace and doesn't really get to the people who are charged with doing these reports until that 10 days is almost up. Okay. Again, who has to do this? Either user facilities or manufacturers have to make MDRs. User facilities only have to do it if that device may have caused or contributed or has caused or contributed to a death or a serious injury. And manufacturers or importers have to do it if that device may have caused or contributed to a death or serious injury, or it has malfunctioned. And if that malfunction were to recur, a death or serious injury is highly probable. So remember, the probability of the malfunction is not an issue at this point. If the malfunction were to recur, a death or serious injury is highly probable. But these are 30-day reports as a rule. Okay. As I said, we've had some, FDA really takes these seriously, and these are a couple of quotes from 2010 warning letters. They are actually warning letters. That is to say, these people not only got a 483, they had a chance to talk with FDA about their 483. FDA was still not satisfied, so they got a warning letter. And you can read them yourself. I'm not going to go through them, but these are both related to medical device reporting. And for example, when requested procedures for MDR reportable events were not provided. So even when FDA asked for these, they didn't get them. This may mean that this company didn't have any, but if they've explained that, they still should have had procedures. And it may be that that's what they told FDA in their response, and that is simply not satisfactory. You have to have, even if you've never had an MDR in your entire company history, you still have to have those procedures for identifying what kind of event is an MDR and what you're going to do about the complaints that aren't MDRs and what you're going to do with the complaints that look like MDRs. So anyway, just absence of that kind of procedure is enough to start FDA thinking about a warning letter. And how do you tell? Well, you can just put this in your procedure. Was a patient seriously injured or died? And was the device employed on the patient when this happened or in a close time to when this happened? Or was it used to diagnose the patient and the diagnosis information was used, say, in treating the patient and the diagnosis was incorrect? That is, say, for example, you are selling an in vitro diagnostic. That in vitro diagnostic gives a report that is lower, much lower than the actual number of the analyte in that patient's blood. And had the number been described correctly, it would have meant that that patient received some medication which he didn't receive. So anyway, if that device was used to diagnose the patient and that injury was due to reliance on that incorrect value, you've got an MDR. Again, a user was seriously injured or died. That is, this user was using the device and died. They were attempting to use the device and they died or were seriously injured, or perhaps an injury showed up after using the device or attempting to use the device shortly after. All of those are reasons for looking further into this incident and determining whether or not you've got a potential MDR. Okay, the harder one is nobody was injured or died, and it malfunctioned. It failed to meet its specs in some way. And for example, I've had in my experience an in vitro diagnostic instrument that if one hit a certain sequence of keys, one that wasn't in the instructions at all, okay, every single value was precessed 1. That is, there was no result for the first patient, but the first patient in the printout got the second patient's results, and so on to the end. This happened more than once, and so the company decided they had an MDR. That device clearly failed to meet its specs because for some reason this set of keys would make all the results precess. If the malfunction were to recur, it would be likely to cause a death or serious injury. This was a unit, an analytical unit that was all over the United States. And in fact, the probability of recurrence was very low because this was almost random set of keys. But the possibility of death or serious injury, if a recurrence, was very high. That company decided that this was an MDR. Yeah, but you have to see whether or not it's likely to cause. This is where you may need, if you don't have a medical group, you may need assistance of a medical consultant. You should have a procedure in writing that lists the factors for your device that you would consider in this determination. You should have a procedure. Your engineers can help you. So can any medical consultant that's familiar with the use of the product. Or if you're a larger company, your own medical department. If the user says they think it caused or contributed, you're into an investigation whether you like it or not. If any of these are a yes, as a matter of fact, you need to do that investigation. And that investigation, or at least the procedure you go through to do that investigation, has to be documented in your complaint file documentation. Okay, for a death or injury, you should be describing the event. And did the event occur, in your opinion, as a result of any of these things? A failure of the device to operate, a malfunction, inadequate design, an error in the manufacturer, that is this particular lot of device you've discovered had a mistake in the manufacturer, inadequate labeling, that is your instructions are not as clear as you thought they were when you first released the device, or was it a user error? And a user error is definitely going to require, you just don't relax and say, well, that person didn't know how to use the device. If it's user error, you have to go back and see, is there some way you can prevent that user error? And could any of these things occur? If they occurred, be a contributing factor. That is, you have to go through all the possibilities and say whether or not they could be a contributing factor to whatever event is coming back to you in your complaint. And then, as I said, there are malfunctions. The malfunctions may be reported as complaints. They may be observed by customers, or they may be observed internally during post-marketing testing or internal use of the product. Specifications that failed. Is there any possible result that could cause a death or a serious injury, either for the user of the device or for the actual patient on whom the device is used? Okay, and now we come to a very current requirement that I think you must really, as a manufacturer, you really have to pay a lot of attention to. And this is electronic reporting. Users aren't required to use electronic reporting, but manufacturers and distributors both are. That is, FDA won't accept reporting in hard copy any longer after August 15th of next year. So if you are reporting MDRs, you're going to have to go to this electronic method. Now, don't confuse this with the MedWatcher program, which is a mobile app introduced in 2013, but was designed mainly for users not required to report, like patients and school nurses, etc., doctors' offices. It's not designed to fulfill the legal requirements for units required to report, like manufacturers and distributors. And it takes effect, as I said, on August 15th, 2015, and it has a website, and I really strongly recommend anybody that's interested in, or at least has the requirement for MDRs, to look at this, because as I said, after August 15th, FDA will not accept a hard copy report. And that means you can be in immediate violation of those requirements that address how long you have between getting that information and making the MDR report. There is now, and at FDA, the Electronic Submissions Gateway. You will need an account. This is not for you people who are already used to doing electronic copies of 510Ks or PMAs. This isn't the same software. This is a completely different system. Don't tell me why this happened. It would have been a lot simpler if they had used the same system for both activities, but they haven't. Submissions have one system, MDRs have another. You will need a web trader account. There are instructions on their website. Then you'll get a personal digital signature, and you'll submit a test report to the Electronic Submissions Gateway. Once that test is satisfactory, you receive a production account. You will use that account number to submit your real MDRs. So you have to have all this in place before that August 15th, 2015 deadline. That's why I'm saying you really have to start thinking about this now. FDA has a lot of help, but it's still a lot more complicated than some of the other requirements. For example, the submissions guidance that and information was good, but the submission software had a bug, and it didn't show up until people had to start using it. This was a problem, but it wasn't a huge problem. It just meant people had a few more days before they could say they'd actually turned in their filing. This one has more of a problem associated with it, and I'll discuss that in a moment. There are two ways to report. For small-size files, one or a few MDRs, FDA e-submitter, which FDA has and which you can use, is the way you'll do it. For large files, you can use this HL7 ICSR to extract data directly from a corporate database. Then you'll get an acknowledgement. Two of them will be from that electronic systems gateway. First of all, you'll receive an acknowledgement that the EMDR was received at ESG. Then there'll be another one that ESG has passed it to CDRH. Finally, you'll get one from CDRH, that is the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, that MDR was successfully loaded into their adverse events database. Well, the time of FDA's receipt is the time of the successful load. Now, that has implications for compliance with report-to-timing regulations, and so far, FDA hasn't said anything about being a little more lenient about missing a timing because your first or even your second EMDR attempt didn't get successfully loaded. FDA is prepared to tell you what the problems with your EMDR are and why it couldn't be loaded. So it may be that you'll only take one more time. But what if you got a 5 or a 10-day limit? And what if the person that got the report didn't get it to the people who have the responsibility for complaint files for a couple of days? This has implications, and they are kind of serious. That's why I think you may want to do EMDRs prior to the 2015 deadline, especially to work out bugs which may exist and seem to exist in almost any new software and as I said, there were bugs in the submission software initially, and had there been some kind of timing requirement on those, people may not have actually succeeded in complying with them. Those bugs all appear to be worked out by now, but this submission software has been in use now for almost a year, so, or maybe even, no, a little more than a year actually. And so it's working okay now. It's my opinion that this electronic reporting software may need quite some time to actually be bug-free. And because of that, I think, you know, even if FDA is the reason that you didn't get that EMDR successfully loaded by them, it's still going to be you that has the responsibility to make that deadline. Okay, so here's our summary on MDRs. We still have to talk about removals and corrections, and maybe if there's time, but I don't know if there will be, if there's time, perhaps to determine the electronic problems. But anyway, the MDR designed to inform FDA about product problems that will pose a health problem. The principal compliance issues from a review of MDRs has been determining malfunctions, that is, the failure of the device to meet their performance specs or failure to perform otherwise as intended. That's a direct quote from the regs. Will malfunctions for off-label use be a problem? Only if the MDR is actually selling for the use. That is, if the MDR has never advertised or had its salespeople talk about that off-label use to any any consumer. And if they can show that, then in fact there is no issue. They don't need to consider that a malfunction. However, FDA is extremely serious about companies that promote off-label use, and that off-label use results in some harm either to the user or a patient. Again, user error, it can be a malfunction, especially for home use devices. If that product has not been tested sufficiently for home use, and there the real issue is user compatibility, and has that device ever been tested? Even if it got a 510K, but it hasn't been tested for user compatibility, there may be a problem. Good record-keeping systems is the other thing. If it's not an MDR, you need a good record of that decision. And finally, complying with the required time limits once an EMDR is required, once you determine that. And I've showed you that may be getting worse once this particular, in August, this particular requirement becomes a reality. So once we get that electronic reporting, there may be a real problem. Now we'll go to recall and recall-associated reports. And I'm going to try to leave that 10 minutes. Oh, we've got 6 minutes till 10 minutes till. Okay. Recalls. You don't have to withdraw a product for it to be recalled. Just sending a letter with a new warning or limitation for a product in the market can be a recall. Or sending your engineers out to replace a part in your instrument can be a recall. Recalls can be voluntary or mandatory. But a voluntary recall is much better in terms of the law than your mandatory recalls. A mandatory recall is actually an order by FDA to get that product fixed or off the market or whatever. Many voluntary recalls have actually been requested by FDA, and there's even a regulation describing that. So FDA will talk to the company, and the company will then voluntarily make a recall. But as I said, they don't have to, it isn't always a market withdrawal. It can be just simply information that comes up that makes you send a new warning. That is, some people are misinterpreting your instructions, and when they misinterpret it, it has the possibility of causing damage to the user or to the client, the customer, whomever. Then you got a recall, but you may not have an MDR. Okay. And here is where it's defined. See, it's a removal or a correction that the Food and Drug Administration considers to be in violation of the laws, and against which the agency would initiate legal action. Guidelines for voluntary recall, not regs, are found at 21 CFR Part 7. And they are guidelines, even though they're in the regs. They say they're guidelines. It's not a market withdrawal or a stock recovery. That is to say, a recall isn't, recalls are not a market withdrawal. That is to say, if you've decided that this model is no longer one that you wish to sell, that's not a recall. It is also, if you send out to your distributors, give us back that model, we're going to substitute the new model, something like that. Recalls are actually published on the FDA website, and as I said, most of them are, in fact, voluntary. A market withdrawal is simply a firm's correction or removal of a distributed product which involves a minor violation or no violation. A normal stock rotation practice, as I pointed out. And a stock recovery is a correction or removal of a product that hasn't been marketed or hasn't left direct control. That is, this hasn't been released for sale yet, and we're not going to release it for sale because we found X, which was some problem that they didn't find earlier. Even so, it's not a removal or correction. It doesn't need a report of removal or correction. Another thing, another kind of event might be, there's a minor violation. You've printed the company logo upside down on the instructions for use. You don't want that to happen, so you withdraw it, or you give everybody a new copy of the instructions for use. This is not actually a recall. As I said, there are three classes. Class 1 recalls are the highest degree of health hazard, and there's a high probability that use or exposure to this defective product would cause a serious adverse health consequence or death, either to the user or to the patient. Intermediate could cause temporary or medically reversible adverse events, and Class 3 are not likely to cause any adverse events, but they are violative. And the example of the label where something wrong with the labeling could be one of these, as long as it's not a mix-up in the instructions for use or the product description. As I said, FDA has the authority to order a device recall, but they don't usually have to, because once they have chatted with the company's regulatory or quality personnel and pointed out that they could do this and they're very concerned about this product condition, then you're not going to get many companies that will say, well, we don't have to till you make us. Unlike other regulated products, FDA doesn't need to go to court for an injunction to force a device firm to stop distributing product. They can do it all on their own hook, and it has legal effect, and it's just like an injunction, but they don't, as I said, need to bring a judge or anything like that into the picture. They can make the device firm stop distributing and tell users to stop using the product. They will need a hearing before the device firm has to remove a product from users, however. That is to say, they can stop selling it. But if there are already a huge bunch of them out there, they do need a hearing, but the hearing is with FDA, not with a judge, not with an independent judge in the legal system. So this is, let's see. Okay, we're coming up okay, the recall components are understand the product issue, define the problem, perform a health hazard analysis. You will classify. FDA will input. They may change it when they get it. Develop that recall strategy. How are you going to do it? Spread the word. And then the termination of the recall, FDA determines that, not you. And as I said, every single one of these steps should be a component of your documentation for your recall procedure. That health hazard analysis, if you don't do them, you're probably doing overall overall hazard analysis. Pull out the health part of that and look at it very closely. It's not a regulation. FDA is required to do one, but you're not. But it's a darn good idea. Recall strategy. FDA will develop it, but companies should develop it if the company initiated this recall, even if it's a voluntary recall that FDA already suggested. There were a few new things in 2012 with the new law, FDASIA. FDA has to create a program, and Congress's expectations are that FDA will report trends in the number and types of recalls, devices most frequently recalled, and underlying causes. That is, they're expecting FDA to really develop a program to assess these recalls and get some usable information about device problems, perhaps, from this. And there is guidance. There is a 212 draft guidance, which is distinguishing medical device recalls from product enhancements. So, and these are helpful, actually. And I think corrections and removals, which require reports, removals are the physical removal of a device. It can be a recall. It may not be a recall. It may be routine maintenance. But the product enhancement may still be reportable under 21 CFR 806. I'm going to, a correction has a definition that's slightly different, but some corrections are recalls. And some corrections may still be reportable under 806, even if not at the level of a recall. Corrections and removals is the regulation in 21 CFR 806, and they have to report any correction that's initiated to reduce the risk of health or to remedy a violation which may present a risk to health, already not reported as a notice of defect or an MDR. This reporting requirement may cover activities that would not be considered recalls. But they do have to have some relationship to a risk to health. There is a device draft guidance and product enhancements on a non-violative product to further reduce the risk to health are reportable. Addition of a new warning, changing and packaging of a sterile device, etc. So improvements may very well be reportable. And FDA is serious about these. There was a 2013 warning letter. You made changes to the instruction for use, and you updated the physician training materials, but you failed to report FDA in writing the field correction affecting all device sizes. So this is just as serious a problem with FDA. And only the legal person who initiates the correction or removal must report. And this indicates when. We've got 10 days. Thank goodness you don't have an electronic requirement yet. And then the content is in 21 806.10. And this is the sort of thing you need to report. So anyway, there are recalls, and they can be either removals or corrections, and they're reported either as an MDR or a report of a correction or removal, which is 21 CFR 806. I see that's an error. Or an electronic product notice of defect. Product changes that are not recalls, you still have to keep records, and FDA can review these records during their inspections. And now we're on electronic products, which I'm not going to talk about because we really are about at that 10, well, we are a little beyond the 10-minute point at which I'm supposed to start taking questions. I would like to make sure that these medical device electronic product definitions and procedures are included in whomever wishes to pick up this later. Is that true, Kara? That is, this whole presentation for which I seem to have gone over somewhat, will be provided to people. Is that correct? Kiara? Well, okay. I'll open it up to questions. Does anyone have any questions? It doesn't sound like it. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll proceed, but I don't know if I can get through this in 5 minutes. Electronic products that are also medical devices. Electronic product is any product that contains or acts as part of an electronic circuit or emits, or in the absence of shielding would emit electronic radiation, or any component or part or accessory that emits electronic radiation. And we're talking about the entire spectrum of radiation, including visible light. Examples of devices that are also electronic products are an X-ray machine, an electron microscope, a flow cytometer with laser light sources. And there are many electronic products that are not medical devices, such as TVs. So these products are have a notice of defect, but the defect they're talking about is a condition that exposes either the user or the patient to unintended radiation. You have to notify the FDA immediately, distributors and purchaser. And if an MDR is required, it's not necessary to report under 1003, just the MDR. They also have a requirement for repair, replacing, and refund, and this is only for radiation-emitting medical devices. They must repair, replace, or refund the defective product, and they have to submit their plans to FDA. This regulation is in effect whether or not notice is required, and it's the most stringent of all those recall regulations that we talked about. PMA products can have additional reporting requirements as well. They have an annual report, and FDA can require a periodic report and usually does. You have to describe the changes, any additional clinical or non-clinical studies and not published that should be known to the PMA holder and involving the device or related, and a bibliography of any reports published in the scientific literature. And there may be additional reporting requirements put on the PMA holder when they get their PMA. It does require review of ads prior to publication, and as a condition of approval can demand registries, post-marketing studies, and so we have a lot of extra in your PMA product that may be required as a report. Then, as I said, the filing is just the beginning. As long as you sell a medical device in the U.S., you will be dealing with the FDA. And the amount of interaction depends on these factors, as I've pointed out. So, if there are any further questions which we're not able to get to today, please feel free to contact me through the Global Compliance Panel. I'll do my best to answer them. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that wonderful presentation, and I would like to thank all the participants for cooperating with us. Dear attendees, if you would like to ask any verbal question, please click on the raise hand option, which is like a palm-like icon, so that I can unmute your phone line to speak to the presenter, or post your questions in the Q&A panel or your questions through chat message. In the meanwhile, please take a moment to share your feedback in the feedback form. This will help us to improve our service and provide you the best webinars in the future. Anna, I don't see any questions coming up. Do you have anything else to conclude the session?
No. As I said, they can contact me through the Global Compliance Panel, and if they actually do have any questions, I would be happy to attempt to answer them.
Thank you so much, Anna. Dear attendees, we are happy to inform you that the webinars will be available in the recorded format and can be purchased from our website, or you can call us at 1-800-385-1627, or you can also send us an email to webinars@globalcompliancepanel.com. We look forward to having you with us sometime soon. On behalf of Presenter Anna and the Global Compliance Panel team, I would like to thank all of you for participating in this webinar and wish you a pleasant day ahead. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna.
Bye.